Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into something pretty specific but really interesting.
Yeah, we're looking at Fortinet SD-WAN and FortiManager.
Exactly, but we're using a slightly different lens. We've
Yeah.
got these practice questions for the FCSS SDWAR 7.4 certification exam.
Right. And the idea isn't like exam prep. Not really.
No, not at all. We want to use these questions to pull out the core, the practical stuff about how these systems actually work.
It's like using the exam structure as a shortcut. Find those key concepts, the technical bits.
So our mission, if you will, is to sort of decode these exam points and get straight to the useful insights about Fortinet's SD-WAN and management tools. Great for anyone wanting to grasp these technical ideas quickly.
And just for context, the exam itself, I think the source mentioned it's like 75 minutes.
Yeah, 75 minutes, 38 multiple choice questions, pass, fail, English language. Covers FortiOS 7.4 and FortiManager 7.4.
But like you said, we're after the tech nuggets inside those questions.
Precisely. Okay, so let's dig in. First big challenge. Managing loads of devices, right? FortiGates everywhere.
Yeah. Hundreds, maybe thousands, doing things one by one. Forget it.
Impossible. So FortiManager is the answer for that scale. How does it actually let admins push out SD-WAN and configs automatically to lots of devices at once?
So that's where the central management really pays off. The sources point to a specific feature, device groups.
Device groups, okay.
Yeah. Basically, you bundle devices together in FortiManager, maybe
Yeah.
based on location or function, whatever makes sense.
And then you push the config to the group.
Exactly. You deploy the SD-WAN policies, the configurations simultaneously to the whole group. It keeps things consistent.
Ah, consistency.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Less manual work, fewer mistakes.
Definitely. Huge time saver.
Okay, so grouping handles the deployment. But for SD-WAN to be smart, it needs to know how well the network links are actually performing, right? It's not just about being up.
Precisely. Up is just step one. You need to know the quality. Is it good enough for, say, voice calls or just bulk data?
So how does it figure that out?
Well, the main way is using performance SLA.
Performance SLA. Got it.
Yeah, this is where the system actively measures the links. It sends out probes, checks things like latency, jitter, packet loss.
So it's constantly testing.
Pretty much. It gets real-time data on how each path is doing for the kind of traffic you've defined.
And that data then feeds into the decisions.
Absolutely. That's what lets the SD-WAN choose the best path at any given moment. It's not guessing. It's using that SLA data.
Okay, so performance SLA is watching the links. What happens if a link, maybe your main one, suddenly tanks? Like the performance drops below those SLA targets he set.
Right, good question. Does the traffic just stop?
Yeah, or does the rule just turn off?
No, that's where the dynamic nature comes in. The sources talk about SD-WAN SLA-based failover.
Okay.
If all the SLA targets fail for the link that's currently being used by an SD-WAN rule, the traffic doesn't just get dropped, and the rule doesn't get disabled or anything drastic like that.
So what does happen?
It automatically fails over. The FortiGate quickly shifts that traffic to another link within that same SD-WAN rule setup.
As long as that link meets the SLA criteria.
Exactly. It finds the next best path that is performing well enough. It's all about keeping things running smoothly. Business continuity,
Makes sense. Seamless failover based on actual performance.
Mm.
Okay, now in these big SD-WAN networks, these overlay networks, how do all the different devices learn about all the possible routes, especially as things change?
Yeah, you need a way for them to share information automatically. That's where dynamic routing protocols come into play, even within the SD-WAN overlay.
Like the ones we know from traditional networking.
Precisely. The sources specifically call out OSPF and BGP.
Okay, OSPF and BGP.
You can run these protocols over the SD-WAN overlay tunnels.
Ah, I see.
So the FortiGates can exchange routing information dynamically. If a new site comes online or a path changes, they tell each other.
Which supports that adaptive path selection we keep talking about?
Exactly. It keeps the whole network aware of the best ways to reach destinations.
Gotcha. Okay, shifting gears slightly. VPNs are obviously key for secure connections between sites.
Fundamental.
So if you're troubleshooting, trying to figure out why a VPN tunnel isn't working, what's like the go-to command on the FortiGate?
Yeah, you need to check the tunnel status itself first. Is it even up?
Right.
The sources highlight a really useful FortiGate CLI command. Diagnose VPN like gateway list.
Diagnose VPN at gateway list, okay.
Yeah, that command gives you a ton of detail about your active IPsec VPNs. Crucially, it shows the status of Phase 1.
The initial negotiation part?
Right, the IKE part. And Phase 2, which is the actual data tunnel.
So you can see right away if the tunnel establishment itself failed.
Exactly. Super helpful for pinpointing VPN problems quickly.
Okay, let's talk about a more advanced setup. AD-VPN, Auto-Discovery VPN.
This is often used in hub-and-spoke topologies.
Right, and the goal is usually to let the spoke sites talk directly to each other without always going through the central...
That's the big benefit, yeah.
Yeah.
Efficiency.
So what's the key technical thing that makes AD-VPN work? How do those spokes connect directly?
The core idea, based on the sources, is that spoke devices can establish direct tunnels to other spokes on demand.
On demand, so not pre-configured.
Correct. If spoke A needs to send, say, voice traffic to spoke B, they don't have to hairpin it through the hub.
Okay.
Instead, they can dynamically negotiate and build a temporary direct IPsec tunnel just between themselves.
So it bypasses the hub for that specific flow.
Exactly. That cuts down latency, reduces the load on the hub. Really good for real-time traffic between branches.
And the source mentioned trying to do that with static tunnels between all spokes.
Oh, yeah. Imagine manually configuring tunnels between hundreds of spokes. It'd be a nightmare. AD-VPN automates that spoke-to-spoke part.
Makes total sense. Okay, so when the SD-WAN is deciding which path to use, you mentioned it looks at SLAs, but are there different overall goals or strategies you can tell it to use?
Yes, definitely. It's not always just about the absolute best performance according to SLA. You might have other priorities. These are the SD-WAN routing strategies.
Go. Like what?
Well, the sources point out a few. One specific one is lowest cost, SLA.
Lowest cost, SLA. So it's about cost, but with a catch.
Kind of. You assign an administrative cost to your links. Maybe your MPLS is low cost and LTE is high cost.
Right.
This strategy tries to use the lowest cost link first, but, and this is key, only if that link meets the required performance SLA targets for that traffic.
So it's cost conscious, but performance is still a gatekeeper.
Exactly. It balances cost efficiency with the necessary application quality. It won't just shove your VoIP calls over a cheap, terrible link if a better one is available and needed.
Got it. Other strategies might prioritize, say, maximizing bandwidth or just simple failover.
Right. Different strategies for different needs.
Okay, let's swing back to FortiManager for a bit. Central management is great, but how do you make sure security rules, firewall policies, IPS, all that are applied consistently everywhere?
Yeah, policy consistency is huge. FortiManager handles this within something called an ADOM, an administrative domain.
ADOM.
And within the ADOM, the key tool is the policy package.
Policy package.
Think of it as a container for your security rules. You define your standard firewall policies, your security profiles, all that stuff once in the policy package.
And then you apply that package to
the device groups or individual devices managed within that ADOM.
Ah, okay. So you change the policy in the package.
And FortiManager pushes that change out to all the linked devices, ensures everyone's playing by the same security rules. Great for compliance, too.
Makes sense. Define once, apply many times. But what if you need slight variations? Even with the standard policy, devices have unique details, like their own IP address, or maybe which physical ports are part of the SD-WAN on that specific box.
Right. Templates are great, but they need some flexibility. That's where metadata variables come in when you use FortiManager templates.
Metadata variables,
Yeah.
like placeholders.
Exactly. When you build your SD-WAN template or any config template in FortiManager, instead of typing a fixed IP address, you can insert a variable.
Okay.
The sources specifically mention using these variables for things like the gateway IP address or defining the actual interface members for the SD-WAN zone on a device.
So the template is generic, but uses these variables.
Yes. And then for each device, you define the value of those variables, maybe in the device settings in FortiManager.
And when you push the template.
FortiManager substitutes the correct value for that specific device, so you get customization within a standardized template. Very powerful.
Okay, we've covered a lot of the how. Management, monitoring, failover, routing, VPNs, policies, templates. What's the master switch on the FortiGate itself? What actually tells it, okay, start doing all this smart SD-WAN stuff?
The fundamental activation step. Good point.
Yeah, how do you turn it on?
The sources state pretty clearly that the key setting is called Enable SD-WAN Rules.
Simple enough. Enable SD-WAN rules.
Yep. And when you check that box or enable that setting on the FortiGate, that's what activates the traffic steering based on your configured SD-WAN rules and those performance SLA checks we talked about.
So without that enabled, the SD-WAN rules and SLA checks just sit there.
Essentially, yes. The device might just use its standard routing table or maybe basic policy routes. Enabling that setting tells the FortiGate, start using the SD-WAN intelligence. Look at the rules, look at the SLAs, and pick paths dynamically.
Got it. That's the trigger for all the dynamic behavior.
Exactly.
So for you listening, here's something to think about. How does understanding these specific capabilities, things like the dynamic failover based on real-time SLAs or the on-demand spoke tunnels and 80 VPN, how does that change how you might think about designing or managing a network?
Good question.
It feels like it shifts things, doesn't it? From just static configuration, setting up routes and hoping they work.
It's something more like dynamic orchestration, building a network that can actually sense what's happening and adapt intelligently.
Exactly. How does knowing these tools exist change the possibilities? How does it elevate network management from just keeping the lights on to actively optimizing performance and resilience? Something to chew on.